the screen flows and then create that, you're probably better off coding and then creating the screen flows and then just letting the user have a feel of it, or having a beta released on it quickly to really see how the people really take this as an application. Now, rapid application development, that's a big word. Now, most of the times, I worked for a bank before where a lot of rapid application development happened for strategic needs. They would create something and then it stays there, and then it gets worse and then it goes out with a bang. Now with Groovy and Grails, what we set forth is not just speed. We set forth reliability in the form of frameworks, in the form of Spring, in the form of Hibernate, which are reliable libraries out there, which is known to work on such long time. And these are probably proven over time that these libraries are best fit for everything that Java really has to offer as a solution right now. Now, when you are on RAD, on Groovy and Grails, the application that you're really building is at a fast pace, qualifying that for RAD, yes. And its solution stays for a long time because whatever you're creating there is, in short time, very reliable code. Yes, we adopt Groovy and Grails, but most of the languages really have these things that you should be taken care of, like, okay, I should be using how to write an immutable class in Java, so should I go with anemic domain and blah blah blah. This stays for Groovy and Grails as a framework too. Now, what should you do and what you should not do with Grails? Basically, there are general recommendations on these, because if you see the previous picture that I circulated in the form of the convention over configuration, you would see folders which are related to controllers, services, views, domain, testing, etc. Now, ideally, if you were to ask me, controllers, mostly it takes it should be one single role to accept requests and spit back something like your HTML or JSON for that matter if you have Ajaxified UIs, and that's where it should stop. And for complexities, you could use command objects which can be useful in some scenarios. Now, if you are talking about business logic, you could move that into services. You can move that into services where it's not exactly the business logic. You enrich the domain with the business logic more, wherein you orchestrate calls between these domains to achieve whatever are your services. Services for me still remain. They should take care of your cases like your transaction aspects and so on and so forth. But that's where you would keep things. The view should remain as simple as possible. It should be dry with templates, custom tab libraries to use for specific elements. That should define it. Now, domains as the main aspect for me here is like it promotes you to really think about the domain, because it's business that it promotes you to think about. Now, remains rich, and it moves away from the anemic pattern of not having any logic inside the domain, promote having logic inside the domain. Testing, it's an enabler. Already we've spoken about it. It also enables it in the form of unit tests, integration tests, acceptance, functional tests, and so on and so forth. We can extend these phases as we go on. Now, the debate between unit and integration tests, we are firm believers in writing both unit tests, giving you faster feedback, but I would still go back home with an integration test written. Now, deploy, and this thing, we deploy as a var. We use managers directly to deploy the Grails application as vars, or we have Puppet modules which will actually deploy them on several servers. The process recommendation, right? It's a best fit for agile process for delivery. it's an amazing fit for test-driven development and design. Well, the trend today is to really go forth with certain kinds of applications, like social applications, mobile applications. Is it ready? If the last few slides have spoken about CloudBees, Heroku as platforms for deployment. These are platforms as a service, which Google App Engines, etc., wherein you can deploy Groovy and Grails as an application for serving out your business, serving out your application needs, and you can buy scale on demand from these. So they are already cloud ready. Now, mobile applications, there are several of them which really are HTML5, which will actually require some MVVM binding, which will spit back JSONs and then Ajaxified UIs and so on and so forth. Social applications, we've already talked about property graph integrations, Neo4j and so on. So that's how we have sustainability with new and disruptive trends in social applications, mobile and cloud. So if you come back to the Q&A, feel free to shoot out the questions that you might be having. The question that came my way was automating the build process with Maven, but it would if you are somebody who is actually invested so much more on Maven for your build and probably deploy too with Cosmo or something, you would be interested to know that with Grails 2.1 there is improved Maven support. The dependency resolution happens with Maven completely, even for Grails plugin. For the versions before like 1.3.7, it was with Maven and Ivy. Now the point is Grails 2.1 really make things easier with generation of the POM file, inclusion of plugins inside that, and having multi-module support for it. So which is one of the things which was missing in Spring Groove for that matter some while back. So it will interest you to really know that Grails has with Grails 2.1, that's considerably improved integration support. The other question was from Madhu. It was, what's the basic difference between Maven plus CI-based deployment to the Groovy and Grails-based deployment? Now, the deploy really starts off with having a WAR file with you, and then you got to deploy that in a server container. Now, your Groovy and Grails side of it really stops with a WAR file that's ending there. Having said that, it's possible for you to really deploy a Groovy and Grails thing directly on with a Tomcat manager, for instance, by just providing a deploy. This can happen. Let's say if you're deploying onto dev or test, it's on single instances. It's easier to do that with Rails deploying itself. But for larger processes, we have really made use of Puppet, etc. for deployment. But Groovy and Grails does not really guarantee you, does not really advocate production deploy as such.
All right, so we are reaching the end of the webinar. We still have questions coming in, but we have time limitations, so we'll not be able to answer them. But we'll be addressing them offline. We'll be sending you a message on your questions. So if you have questions, please feel free to contact us at info@peoplezen.com. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so we'll be sending you the white paper. Thank you.